everyone, and welcome to the Garden Gallery. I'm Cherry Artemis, and I shall be your artist. I've got a little something different this video. You may not know it, but I'm a Genshin fan. While I don't play because I don't have any data space or money, I'm invested in the lore and characters. One of the factions I'm interested in the most is the Fatui, specifically the Harbingers. So a couple years ago, I posted a TikTok about me looking up the characters of the Commedia dell'arte and saying, rather than making OCs to fit other Commedia dell'arte characters, why not turn other Genshin characters into Harbingers instead? And that made me spiral into a rabbit hole of causing me to spend a couple days drafting up ideas for characters as Harbingers and their new backstories. So here's part 1 of 3 of my 21.5 Fatui Harbingers AU. Why is it 21.5? You'll find out later in the video. Just a heads up, the time frames between each Speedpaint differ quite drastically, so if you notice inconsistencies in my style, that's why. Alright, let's get into it. First up is the 12th Fatui Harbinger, codenamed Zani, the Aggressor, and Shenhe volunteered to play the part. I gave her that title for her aggressive, or as the English translated it, homicidal tendencies. Anyway, allow me to read you my notes to her backstory change. You'll see later on that my writing for her is less story-esque compared to future notes and more of a brief idea of what I was thinking. For this story, Shenhe wasn't taken in by Cloud Retainer. She left the cave before Cloud Retainer could find her. She returns to the village in a fury, angry at her father for abandoning her, leaving her to die to that monster, for nearly tricking her to her death. So she sent him to see his wife again. She left her village and lived on her own in the wild, her desire for bloodshed growing and her hatred for humanity never stopping. When she was found by Fatui, she was taken in and raised in their ranks. With her strength and unique exorcism abilities, she became a Harbinger. Fights Child on the regular for both of their sakes, Child for his identical bloodthirsty combat tendencies, and Shenhe to quell her violent homicidal tendencies. So yeah, in this AU, Shenhe was not taken in by Cloud Retainer and unleashed her inner monster. She lived alone in the mountains fighting to survive until she was taken in by the Fatui. To clear some things up in the backstory, Shenhe killed the monster as a child and earned her vision just as in canon. She would have been found as maybe a young tween and fights in the Fatui throughout her teenage years. During this time, she decides to learn more about her heritage and starts practicing her bloodline's exorcism. The Fatui, probably Dottore, would have done some research and found the red rope restrictions to hold Shenhe's violence back a bit. Speaking of the red ropes, let's talk a bit about her design. Shenhe's current outfit, the World's Shackles, is said to be the robes of the Adepti. It has a subtle bird-like appearance with the train and sleeves, most likely due to her upbringing with the Crane Adeptus, Cloud Retainer. The red strings are given to her by Cloud Retainer as a way to restrain her bloodlust. The red ropes seemed so important to her person that I thought it was important to keep them in her Harbinger design. Plus, if she didn't have them, she'd basically be another battle-crazy maniac, and I'm guessing the Harbingers don't want another child. I also gave her a darker color palette, a representation of how she remained in the dark, but also it's to counter Chongyun and reflect yin and yang. Chongyun dresses in light colors to help reduce heat absorption because of his yang energy. Yin is black and represents femininity, the moon, and negativity. Seemed perfect to me. Shenhe is supposed to be an exorcist. With some surface-level research, I found out about Fang Xiangxi. I'm so sorry if I mispronounced that. In China, Fang Xiangxi is a Chinese ritual exorcist. From what I quickly read online, it roughly translates along the lines of one who sees in all directions, he who scrutinizes for evil in many directions, and one who orients unwanted spirits in the direction to which they belong. Just like you would think, it was their job to deal with evil, malevolent, and harmful spirits in household and certain events. I looked at different artistic depictions of these exorcists and tried to take some inspiration from the attire. Keyword, tried. I'm not very creative with outfit design, and I was kind of terrified of designing something wrong, so I turned to inspiration from Shenhe's original outfit instead. I kept the skin-tight aspect of the outfit with some flowing aspects, an element of the Genshin outfit style. Liyue characters also wear lots of Chinese rope knots in their designs, so I tried to sneakily add it in last minute when I realized this in the form of the red rope trains in the back. Although I will admit I made the knots wrong in my initial concept design, so I had to change it again last minute. The 3-loop knot I used has a few names that I've seen. I saw an image call it simply a Buddha knot, but I think that applies to multiple knots. I've seen it called a butterfly knot, the Chinese flower knot, or the 3-leaf clover knot. Like many Chinese knots, they symbolize longevity, eternity, and good luck. They also ward off evil spirits, fitting for an exorcist. To add some more detail, I added some designs based from Taoist ritual objects, specifically writing from a Fulu talisman. I tried to copy the design of one as best I could, but the thick brushstrokes and other references were a bit hard to follow, so it's probably still wrong somehow, and I deeply apologize. I don't usually design patterns well, but I knew I had to if I wanted to make these outfits just Genshin enough to pass the detail test. Even then, I still think I failed. On the arms, I kept the long flowing sleeves, but I added some arm/shoulder armor inspired by Chinese armor. The Fatui have a small diamond theme in their designs too, so I tried to create diamonds in the outfit in certain ways. Her shoes, I can't really explain. I don't know what I was thinking, honestly. I designed it based on her OG outfit's shoes, but edited? I don't know. As an accessory, I added a beaded choker and a red rope anklet, things I found to have a connection to rituals in some way and spiritual protection, plus the red rope thing. As for her hair, I knew I wanted to keep it long because it's gorgeous, but since her hair is white because of Cloud Retainer's comb, I kept her hair black, her original hair color, but I added a white streak. Early white hair can happen for a multitude of reasons, but for Shenhe, I'm writing it out to be a mix of stress and Genshin convenience magic. I kept her hair down and loose because I like to imagine it being too much of a hassle to do her hair herself, like she can't be bothered because she has training to do. Anyway, here she is. I think she turned out alright. Next up is the 13th Harbinger, codenamed Brigella, the Viper. For this Harbinger, I chose Kaeya. While vipers are usually referred to in the animal, a viper, or a snake, is also a verb that refers to someone who is spiteful and treacherous. The character Brigella is a manipulative and a master liar, able to create lies on the spot to fit the situation. He's self-sufficient and self-driven. And get this, he likes drinks. That immediately sold me, and I was determined to make Kaeya Brigella specifically. While I wouldn't say Kaeya is a total liar, I think he could definitely make use of his smooth words and charisma to be a suave liar. Anyway, here are the notes. After the confrontation with Diluc and getting his vision, Kaeya is later relieved of duty from Ordo Favonius, his secret mission being outed through servant gossip. The gossip spreads and Kaeya was banished from Mondstadt, but then he had another confrontation with Diluc, while Diluc was on his 3 to 4 year absence. Kaeya snapped and was later recruited into Fatui. With the skills in lying, manipulation, and suave mask, he became a Harbinger. Okay, so some backstory changes. Diluc lets Kaeya leave as per canon. As the rewrite states, servant gossip happens and word gets out about what happened between Diluc and Kaeya, especially the argument. Kaeya is confronted by Jean and the Knights about this rumor. Kaeya does or doesn't confirm, which means he definitely did. His nerves, mind, and emotions are too wrecked to smoothly lie. He tries to reason with Jean and tell her that no matter what, he would never betray Mondstadt. Being a spy may have been his original mission, but Kaeya had come to love Mondstadt. But word has already spread throughout the city. The people would be too terrified and suspicious of Kaeya to let him help with anything, and Jean has to put the people of Mondstadt first. If they don't trust the cavalry captain, they can't trust the rest of the knights. For the sake of the people and the knights, Kaeya is relieved of duty, but he's welcome to stay in the Mondstadt region. Kaeya smiles, but he doesn't take it well inside. He leaves Mondstadt for good and wanders to Vat for a year until he comes across Fatui. That's when he gets an idea. If Mondstadt thinks he's a villain, why not be the one they want? After insisting for a long while, he's finally brought to the Harbingers. He reveals his origin, and Pieto is immediately called. Pieto pities Kaeya, seeing another Conrian fall from grace. Kaeya joins the ranks of the Fatui and makes his way up until he becomes a Harbinger. So, I don't really care for the Prince Kaeya theory or the Son of Pieto theory. I just feel like Pieto would maybe sympathize and pity Kaeya's situation. Kaeya would specialize in information gathering and forming connections with others around the continent. Kaeya is a very good liar and controls his expressions well. I don't remember if this was true, but I think he gathers info through tavern gossip. That could just be something purely made up for fanfic I read somewhere. Whether it's true, that idea inspired his specialty work. Sure, he has agents to do that, but I headcanon that Harbinger Kaeya still has fun and does the work himself. This is also how he forms connections with other people of influence and gains Fatui alliances and partnerships. For Kaeya's design, I knew I wanted to keep the corset from his original outfit. I knew I also wanted to give him a full cape, unlike that sheet of fabric draped behind his back in his regular design. You'll see later on that capes tend to be a bit of a theme with my Fatui designs. I kept the fur trim because it seems important to have if you're in Snezhnaya a lot. Just as the story says, Kaeya wears a mask to cover his Conrian star eyes. He's not ashamed of them or anything, but I imagine that he wears it anyway for his Fatui status. He only ever takes it off if he's around the Jester and the Jester alone. I think Kaeya would be open about having the blood of a dead nation, and the Jester would be slightly intrigued. After all, Kaeya is of Conrian descent, and he isn't cursed into a monstrous form like the rest, or with immortality like Dainsleif. I tried to incorporate the diamond aesthetic in the Fatui outfits, but also stars that's shared with Piero and Dainsleif. The confrontation still happens as normal, and Kaeya gets his cryovision, something Piero is confused about. What I decided to do is place it on his hand instead of his hip, because, if you remember from the webcomic, Diluc had a left glove with a delusion in it, so I put Kaeya's vision on the right glove. I also added a harness to the design, something both Childe and Dottore have, so I figured I'd add them for Kaeya too. It fits his image, somehow. I honestly don't have much to say about his design. I'm not too satisfied with it, but I still think it's pretty good. And here is the final product. Honestly, the design draft looked more detailed than I think it actually was. Plus, it's been a long time since I've bothered looking at the designs by the time I made these speed paints, and I can't really remember what I was designing at the time. But regardless, let's move on to the final Harbinger, Gli Innamorati. Lavinia and Sireno, the 14th and a half Harbinger, Gli Innamorati, is the perfect pair. The original translation is the lovers, but I changed it because of the characters. Similar to how Tartaglia, the young lord, or directly translated as stutterer, was made child. As for the names Lavinia and Sireno, they're just names I saw listed on the Wikipedia as names used for the lovers. Lavinia comes from the Roman myth, named after Aeneas' wife and daughter of King Latinus. Sireno is a name used for a stock character that's often used as a son of Pantalone. I just thought it'd be funny, so I used it. For my final victims of the video, we have Noel and Bennett. Now, as you heard at the beginning of the video, here is where the 21.5 thing comes in. Noel is the one who is the Harbinger, but she and Bennett are a packaged pair in this AU. The two are very close and prefer to always work together rather than alone. I'll explain Noel first. Noel fails yet another entrance exam to become a knight, and she asks why she failed. The knights give her an answer about her not being strong enough, but she later overhears they simply like having an errand girl, and the Ordo Favonius has no use for a little girl like her. Angered and betrayed by the people she looked up to, she quit and left. That's when she finds Bennett. So, I wrote that without really properly looking into Noel's character, but after some reading, I still think she'd be a great candidate. Apparently, she scared a Snezhnayan merchant out of Mondstadt because she basically studied and background checked him too well. Kick up her background checking abilities up a notch, and with her many other talents, she'd be a great asset in the Fatui ranks. She could become a jack of all trades and master of all. Anyway, Noel's outfit. I gave her knight armor that's mostly fantasy inspired, but I wanted to keep her old feminine design and kept the skirt. In comparison to her maid-like appearance, I wanted to go for a war maiden-like appearance, so I decked her out in some more armor. For a hint of edge, I gave the top of her skirt a cage covered in roses and thorny vines. I was inspired by Katsu Star's Lily Shirogane's Starwing dress, Rosetta Thorn. To add to her already existing rose theme, I added a rose eye patch, inspired by the rose wig worn by Doll from Black Butler, and that dramatic imagery of flowers over eyes in art. And, of course, she gets a cape like the girl boss she was always meant to be. Switching topics, while I now understand why she's subjected to maid's work and kept out of dangerous situations, I say she eventually gets fed up. After failing her latest exam, she decides to investigate why. She knows that everyone cares about her, but she overhears some other knights saying that they enjoy having such a reliable person as a maid, doing the basic work none of them want to do. Canonically, the knights are not that cruel, but this is my AU, and what I say goes. And what I say is that they basically tip Noel over the edge. I took out the Ordo Favonius has no use for a little girl like her part because that seems too mean. So Noel quits, but without proper notice. She just wanted out. As she's leaving, she happens to run into Bennett, who is also in the process of leaving Mondstadt. Speaking of Bennett, let's move on to him. Bennett, oh you poor boy, I am so sorry I made your already unfortunate life absolutely soul-crushing. Here's his new backstory. Be warned, I went a bit heavy into the angst and it does include a death. Skip to this timestamp if you don't want to hear about familial death. Bennett was adventuring with his dads, but that day was the worst day of all worst days for Bennett's luck. They were adventuring when it started to thunder. Rain fell and lightning struck the ground. Bennett and his dads take shelter in a cave, but the cave begins to collapse from the storm. One dad is trapped while Bennett and his other dad escape. Bennett's dad goes to get help and Bennett stays behind. He manages to free his dad from the cave, and the two go to find dad number 2. Bennett finds that his father was caught in an avalanche. Before Bennett can cry, the ground beneath them starts to crumble. Great, another cliff breaking off. To shield Bennett from the fall, Dad 1 breaks his fall, saving Bennett, but knocking the wind out of him. Bennett, overcome with grief and guilt, runs away. He doesn't return to Mondstadt. Then he finds Noel. The two share their stories and decide to travel together, and combining their strengths to fight. Bennett's bad luck to draw out enemies, and the two fight together, and Noel opens the chest to retrieve the spoils. When Bennett accidentally leads them to a Fatui camp, they get taken in. The two are resilient, but the Fatui can sense grief and hurt from them and gives them an offer. For the sake of their safety, they figure, why not? Noel trains harder than ever before, and Bennett receives tutelage to better wield his pyro abilities and his sword. Bennett becomes a full-fledged warrior, and Noel rises to a high rank she could only ever dream of in Oro Favonius. Noel becomes a Harbinger, and Bennett becomes a leading pyro agent. But since she and Bennett are a package deal, he's placed under her command. Despite being a Harbinger, she still does missions with Bennett, much to the dismay of soldiers around her. Along with working with Noel, Bennett is also sent on infiltration and sabotage missions, turning his curse into a blessing. Yeah, sorry Bennett, I adore you, but my AU calls for it. Anyway, his outfit wasn't too hard to think up. I referenced the Pyro Agents as well as the Fatui Bennett edit on Twitter X by @GonYouGirl. I removed the band-aid on his nose to showcase the scar I know he probably has or would have gained at some point. He wears his goggles on his hip, unable to wear them proudly as an adventurer anymore, but unable to part with them completely. Because he's a different status from the regular Pyro Agents, his outfit is more unique with some new aspects. I added yellow tails behind him, resembling a phoenix, symbolizing how he's always falling and failing from bad luck, but he always picks himself back up, even as a Fatui member. He gets a cool cape because all the best agents get capes, but yeah, his outfit is mostly Pyro Agent inspired with some changes to make him look cooler or unique. At least, I hope he looks cooler. To explain the two, Bennett and Noel worked together as regular agents and soldiers. When they weren't together, Bennett was with the Pyro Agents and skirmishers to better hone his pyro abilities. Meanwhile, Noel would train with the mages and mirror maidens. As stated in the story, Bennett mainly takes on infiltration missions and sabotaging jobs. As troublesome as his luck is, the Fatui think it could be of good use when used right. His bad luck was proven to be a curse from the heavens, found out by the 21st Harbinger, Menegino, commonly known as Chaos. We'll get to him when we cross that bridge. There's no reason Chaos could find for being cursed, just that Bennett was cursed. With Bennett now understanding that he was cursed from the beginning, he no longer felt sorry for what would happen and took full advantage of it. As for Noel, she became busy with Harbinger responsibilities, but she still makes time to go out with Bennett. As stated in the story, her soldiers don't approve of their Lady Harbinger going out doing grunt work, but she tells them to mind their business and that she can do whatever she wants. She's strong enough to protect herself, even more so with Bennett by her side. During her rare free time, she'll come see Bennett if their schedules align. Sometimes she'll assign him missions with her just as an excuse to hang out with him. After all, they're still friends despite their rankings. Anyway, here is Bennett finished, and here are the two together. Again, I feel like the designs were more detailed in my drafts. I even accidentally took out a somewhat noticeable underskirt layer in Noel's design, thinking it would be too cluttered and bottom-heavy. Still, it was a lot of detail for me at the time. Still kind of is for current me. But I hope you enjoyed my little AU anyway. Until next time, stay tuned for the next part. Bye!